Hello and welcome to this talk about platform thinking in a multi-cloud world. So my name is Bjoern Brundert. I'm a principal technologist in the Central EMEA region, and I have a CTO function, so I cover all the technologies that VMware builds and delivers, and I'm super excited to be here. So thank you very much for coming to this talk. So first of all, I'm very excited to be back at DevOps stage. So I was in Kyiv in 2019, and I had a really wonderful time at this great conference, and I met a lot of amazing people in a beautiful city. So thanks again for inviting me. I very much look forward to the opportunity to come back and be in person with all of you, also in Ukraine. As a company, we stand with Ukraine and we commend the bravery of the Ukrainian people. We remain committed to supporting our Ukrainian colleagues, our team members, our customers, and our partners, of course, right? I just wanted to share this. And I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about this topic. So multi-cloud, let's start with that, right? Multi-cloud, we expect this to be the business model for the next 20 years, right? So in a global economy where digital first has become a mandate, organizations are looking at ways how to innovate, right? And what we're seeing is that basically 3 out of 4 companies that I interact with run workloads, not just in one, but in multiple clouds, right? And the number of applications is constantly increasing, and the number of workers accessing those applications and working in the companies is also increasing, right? So remote work is here to stay. I'm not calling it even remote work anymore. It's just work, right? But the reality, and I heard this so often now, the reality is multi-cloud is here, right? And multi-cloud is going to stay. Doing everything in just one cloud, for example, is not going to work out just from a innovation perspective, right? At the same time, the multi-cloud transformation hasn't been easy, right? So there are a lot of challenges associated with going into the cloud. And one of them is related, of course, to risk around security, data, and privacy, but also the inconsistency of infrastructure. Every cloud has their own way of doing things. Everyone has their own APIs. Everyone has their own services when it comes to data, for example, whether it's a data service or a database or whatever. And this also applies, of course, to the skills gap, right? So the more services are out there, the more clouds are out there, the more difficult it will be to find somebody that can actually deal with this complexity. So a skills gap is a topic, and the complexity in managing all of this as well. And once this is all managed and sort of sorted, right, we still need to look at how do we optimize it and how do we look at cost, right? And the reality is, if we look at the landscape of an environment, right? So you have your private cloud, you have your systems running in AWS, for example, in Azure, in Google, but also in sovereign clouds or in telco clouds or in the edge, right? So you have a distributed cloud infrastructure, you have distributed applications, but then you also have a distributed workforce, right? As I laid out earlier, there is like 1 billion people working remote. So how do you deal with all of this, right? And we typically see 3 phases on this cloud journey. So the first phase is typically a cloud first, right? So focusing on the low-hanging fruits, and you basically go in and say, hey, you know what, let's embrace public cloud and let's do it, right? But this began like more than a dozen years or so, right? It's not like a new approach for most companies. Secondly, when companies have embraced the cloud and they start moving workloads, they realize typically after some time that this is actually not so easy, right? Migration of application becomes slow, and that's probably the situation that 80% of the organizations in right now, right? So most of them are struggling with this, and we call this phase the cloud chaos phase, right? So you have realized, okay, the complexity is higher than anticipated. It's not that easy to manage all of this. So with greater choice comes greater complexity, right? And the third phase that we try to get folks to is being cloud smart. And being cloud smart means finding and choosing the right cloud for the right application, right? And this is supported and enabled by consistent management across the different clouds and the cost-effective use of the different technologies that you have in the portfolio, right? Some of these applications might run best on your own infrastructure or in an edge environment or in a public cloud, for example, right? And being smart on this and having the capabilities to choose for every application, that's the important piece. Because, and this is we're still talking today, right? And so we've seen waves of application innovation. So we saw the rise of the PC apps, which had a business impact, right? But over time, we also saw the web applications and everything related to that. So the business impact has increased through the web applications, and they were quickly followed by the mobile applications, right? So a lot of applications have been built for a mobile usage these days, and they drive businesses forward quite quickly. But there is a new wave of applications just being created, right? And these are the AI apps, right? And while we anticipated already like hundreds of millions of new applications being built in the next couple of years, AI is going to change this, right? And let's briefly dive into this topic, right? Because technically, I think this will shape the way we see also platform thinking in a variety of areas, right? So what changed or what has happened in the past few months or maybe the past year, right? So we saw this shift from AI being used for specialized work, right? So you had your data scientists, they were building specialized models, right? So which was all around, it was more predictive AI, right? So that was the topic. What changed is we went into large foundational models, right? And one of these iterations of this are large language models. And generative AI has become such an important thing because it's not a specialized effort anymore, right? So you can apply generative AI in marketing, in the supply chain. You can also apply it in software development, right? Or you can leverage it, of course, in things like customer operations that are very, very, where you have very quick wins as well, right? And natural language interaction has been a key topic for driving this forward, but also the ease of use, right? It's so easy and it's so accessible for so many users. So you don't need the specialized data scientists to actually interact with your model. One of the big challenges we are seeing and customers are reporting to us is around privacy, right? So first of all, intellectual property, right? So how do you make sure you don't expose intellectual property or you minimize the risk to intellectual property in general? That's one dimension that folks are thinking about. The other one is about data, right? So I need to be sure my data will never be shared externally, right? In a large shared environment, this might not be the case. Or regulations might be in place that prevent you from actually doing or leveraging those capabilities at scale because of the sensitivity of data. And the third one is, of course, access to those models, right? So you need to have complete access over the models. That's another requirement that we heard quite often from folks, right? And so how do you deal with this, right? In a multi-cloud scenario or in a public cloud first scenario, for example, that's something where you need to have certain considerations. So what we did is we came up, our team, so we have a team that's called VMware AI Labs, right? So that's a large group. We have been using machine learning internally for a number of years. And we brought the smartest folks together in this VMware AI Labs organization. And one of the concepts we are discussing is private AI. And private AI is, like it says here, an architectural approach that basically balances the business gains that you get from AI on the one side with the privacy and the compliance needs of the organization, right? So bringing those two sides together, I think is super, super important. And private AI also addresses a number of requirements, right? Choice. So I don't know, 18 months ago, people had their opinion about where would I go when it comes to AI workloads, right? I think this has dramatically updated itself, right? So if you had a policy like 18 months ago, this is what we're doing with AI. And if you look at the space now and you make new decisions about what to do, I think decisions might look different, right? So staying flexible and being able to adapt means you need to be able to have a choice, right? If you don't have a choice anymore because you made some very important decisions at the beginning and you're no longer able to change it, difficult. Same for cost, right? How do you keep all the cost under control, right? How do you ensure the right performance? And what kind of compliance do you need to fulfill and get done, right? And I don't want to dive into this too deep, right? But I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what we are doing and what we have been doing. So one is we build a reference architecture for what we call VMware Private AI, right? So this is built on our core technologies around Cloud Foundation. Cloud Foundation is our stack where you can deploy a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, but you can also rent VMware Cloud Foundation as a service, if you will, from hyperscalers. So we have a joint offering with AWS. There is an offering from Google, from Azure, Oracle, IBM, you name it, right? It's basically all the clouds plus 4,000 service providers worldwide that offer the technology. And on top of this, we have built integrations and capabilities around deep learning VMs, vector databases, scaling the GPUs that are in the software stack, and accelerating, for example, the way we provide storage, right? And then we have integrations with Ray, very, very exciting, but also things like Kubeflow, PyTorch, and then, of course, the collaborations that I'll come to in a second, which is around the open ecosystem, right, that we're working with. So we have been partnering with the big vendors for a number of years, right? So our ecosystem is very open. We are doing work with AMD, with Intel, with NVIDIA specifically, but also with the hyperscalers and the open source community, right? So whether it's Anyscale and Ray in this scenario, with Domino Data Labs or any other company that you see on the slide and the capabilities there. And I just wanted to call out one collaboration because that's super exciting, especially in this software development space, is Hugging Face, right? Hugging Face is basically, in my words, the GitHub for the machine learning and AI space, right? So this is where you get your models and where you can share your models, and it's the place where a lot of the community in machine learning and AI comes together. And what we just launched at our main conference in Las Vegas earlier in August was what we call Safe, or what Hugging Face is calling Safe Coder. And Safe Coder is basically a code assistant, very similar to what GitHub Copilot does, right? But you can run it on your own infrastructure, right? And you can train it with the data that you wanted exposed, right? So VMware has been using this as a customer zero, if you will. So we implemented this on our code and made it accessible to our dev teams, and they were super happy, right? So we had a very, very positive, I think more than 9 out of 10 people were wanted to continue using the technology, and it was a very, very good experience for them, right? So that's one of the technologies. The other area, if you want it more prescriptive when it comes to setting this up, we build a joint solution with NVIDIA. And this is built on top of the, as I said, Cloud Foundation stack and NVIDIA AI Enterprise. And it's bringing the capabilities of both technologies and both companies together to make AI accessible to even more organizations around the globe, right? So leveraging AI where you want it, right? Where there is data, there will be AI, I think is a very smart way of putting it. So it doesn't really matter, right? If it's in your own data center, in the cloud, in the edge, data is being created everywhere, and you want to make most out of your data wherever you are, right? And if we look at software development specifically, right? So if we surveyed IT leaders, and most of them are migrating apps to the cloud, right? Most of them are using containers and Kubernetes. Most of them are using open source software. Most of them are using multiple clouds, actually. And we're getting to a majority of folks that are actually starting to deploy AI and machine learning apps, right? So the big question, and this is actually part of the theme here, the platform thinking idea is, so how do you provide all the capabilities? How do you make sure in this complex world that we're living in right now, just from a technology perspective, how do you provide this out to the developers, right? And 94% in a survey that we commissioned in 2022 said developer experience has executive priority, right? At the same time, many of those folks also said, we don't really think we're mature, right? So the challenge there is, how do we improve the developer productivity, right? How do we make developers happy and help them use all those technologies without exposing 15 different clouds to them and making it very difficult for them to build software? How do we improve security without slowing down the application delivery, right? So, I mean, everybody heard about all the security breaches that happen, right? I mean, the faster we build software, the more issues we will have. So how do we get to a point where we can quickly react in the application lifecycle and go back and actually fix it without slowing down the delivery? How do we scale Kubernetes, right? And the applications on Kubernetes without downtime? And then lastly, in the operations and in the day two operation space specifically, how do we optimize cost? How do we look at performance? How do we look at security of applications running in different and multiple clouds, right? So it's all around, how do we accelerate application delivery, right? Because in the end, and we've seen that number before in different contexts, right? So traditional companies ship, 1 to 4 times a year, right? When it comes to software. And the leading companies are doing it like 10 to 50 times a year. But the world-class companies, they do it in the thousands of releases, right? So 4 to 18,000 releases a year is what the world-class folks actually do, right? But, and as I said before, multi-cloud is a reality. So many organizations are embracing this. At the same time, the complexity for the organization and the software development teams is rising. So the challenge is, how do you deal with all of this stuff, right? Containers and Kubernetes runtimes, the cost optimization just for Kubernetes. Secure supply chain. Where do you get your open source images from and your components that you use in your stack? Expose that in a catalog, right? How do you optimize scale out? How do you make sure observability is in place? You have runtime security, etc. Right? So all of these are challenges, and sometimes they are even silo challenges that you need to repeat in every environment. You have a cloud A, and lifecycle management and cost optimization is done in one specific way. You have a different cloud, you need to do it in a completely different way. Same for connectivity, same for the runtimes, for example, right? It can be quite a challenge. So the approach we're taking is to regroup these efforts, right? And take a look at, okay, how do we develop our software? How do we operate it? And how do we optimize it? And put all these challenges into all these different components, right? So OSS packages, CI/CD, access control, etc. So we build them in develop, operate, and optimize, and then have a common control plane and federated data, including data from the ecosystem across these different domains, and then focus on the outcomes, right? Find a golden path to production, make it easy, and capture the knowledge and the patterns to make software development easy and accessible. The other one, operate. How do we deploy and manage applications at scale, right? And then how do I continuously tune cost, right? I mean, cost optimization is an ever returning effort, same as security, right? So how do I ensure the security of my applications at runtime? And putting this all together, this is what we believe platform engineering teams should be able to do in an organization, right? They should be able to enable their organization to develop apps more quickly, to operate them more seamlessly, and at the same time update and optimize them continuously when it comes to cost and security, right? So these are the dimensions of platform teams. And a lot of people are talking about platform engineering these days, right? But one of maybe the most important aspect of platform engineering is treating a platform as a product, right? So building a platform is not for us, as Thomas from Mercedes is saying. We're building a platform for the developers of the organization, right? So it's not about the technology providers, the platform folks that are doing this, right? It's about what are you building the platform for and how are people using it. So, and just some of the dimensions you need to worry about, right? To drive adoption, to drive folks to do this successfully. This is about, looking at what are you building, right? And building a brand around it, right? And making people aware of it through training and enablement, through easy onboarding and self-service, through integrating third parties, right? And then treating the platform as a product, right? And by treating it as a product, you also expect a roadmap. You have a capacity planning function. You have a balanced team that actually understands the needs of a variety of groups. You have a good path to production, emergency response teams, right? So all these efforts come together when it comes to building a platform as a product, right? Because in the end, and this is what I'm trying to get to here, in the end, the application developers, right, they don't want to build platforms. They want to build applications, right? So all the planning involved and all the tool selection, right, or the open source project selection can be quite daunting. And integrating all these components together is a really big effort, right? And whenever you spend a minute on platform optimization as a developer, you're not spending that minute on code, new features, or fixing bugs, right? Product managing this, right? Making sure you have updates, maintenance, patching, operating this 24/7, doing diagnosis of problems and getting into the issues when it comes to patching and security updates, right? So these are jobs on their own, right? And this is not something you can do on the side when you're a developer, right? So developers should always be able to focus on building code and not platforms. And when you build your own platform, that can actually be pretty complicated as well, right? So one general recommendation is start with something that works, right? And we have stuff to offer. So Tanzu Application Platform, Tanzu Application Service, which is built on Cloud Foundry, the open source technology. So, but start with something that works out of the box. And so Tanzu Application Platform, for example, which is a developer platform built on top of Kubernetes, is something that is very easy and highly customizable, but also something, you want to use as much as possible out of the box. And it also comes to a change in the ops culture, right? And I don't want to dive into this too deeply, but instead of being reactive, right? And when it comes to customer interactions, for example, you need to be proactive. You need to do service reviews. You need to have feedback loops and proactive documentation, making sure folks understand what you're building, right? Because only that way you can become an expert that adds value instead of just somebody that is a cost to the business, right? And the ultimate goal is, together with the development teams, to find an automated path to production, right? So taking a look at what is the business need, and then having a balanced team that can actually focus on building out the technology and build it as easy and as automated as possible to get stuff into production. And there's a bunch of things to choose from, right? And there's this famous slide from the CNCF. So all the different tools that are out there, and a lot of innovation is happening in open source. How do you bring this to market? How do you bring this to your teams, right? And this is something that the developers independently cannot do, right? So as a company, VMware is involved in a number of those different foundations, right? So the CNCF is just one, the Linux Foundation, but also foundations like the OpenSSF, the Open Source Security Foundation, which is coming together to improve the reliability and the security of open source software, right? So very important aspect. So we learn a lot through these interactions also with our peers in the industry to make software better, right? And one of the big things in this space, especially in the cloud native space, is Kubernetes, right? And Kubernetes has become this focal point where a lot of innovation is happening. A lot of the most important innovation and open source projects are happening. And our portfolio, so we have a full portfolio centered around Kubernetes and the cloud native movement, which is the Tanzu portfolio. And Tanzu includes things like Spring, right? But it also embodies and has all the learnings from the Cloud Foundry ecosystem. Pivotal Labs, how do you build your applications, and all the stuff that we learned through the acquisition of a company named Pivotal a few years ago. Same applies to Kubernetes and the acquisition of Heptio a few years ago. So all of this has been transferred into VMware's DNA, right? And this is all embodied in the Tanzu brand, right? And in Tanzu, we focus on those three topics, right? How do we develop, how do we operate, and how do we optimize software? And this is what we are putting together in this brand. And I just briefly want to give you an overview about the two major dimensions here. So one is the Tanzu application platform, which is a portfolio consisting of a developer portal powered by Backstage, right? The very famous open source project there, software supply chains, and Kubernetes operations. And Tanzu application platform in specific brings things like application accelerators. So predefined, slightly opinionated ways of getting applications started, right? Also an API catalog. I mentioned the developer portal already, but also things like dashboards and automated build service if you want it, right? Secondly, the other dimension that I wanted to share here is we added something called Tanzu Application Engine. And this application engine is there to help you define a space, and the space basically carries the configuration around auto-scaling, availability, upgrades, etc. Of the application, right? And I come to that in a quick demo in a few minutes. So I'll show you this in action. The other area is Tanzu Intelligence Services, right? And these carry things like cloud health, for example, right? For cost optimization in the cloud, but also other components coming together, making this easy to use, especially in the optimize phase, right? So how does multi-cloud platform thinking actually work in practice, right? And I want to give you a quick demo of how we see things coming together, right? And we'll start with the example of Scott. Scott is a developer, and Scott actually works on an application which is the Acme Fitness application, right? So it's an existing application, and he was asked to take a look at this application and add something to it, right? So the current architecture looks like this. So we have we have some front-end services, right? We have some back-end services, a variety of languages, JavaScript, Python, Golang. So there's a variety of stuff already out there, right? And Scott is now asked to add a chatbot to this application because AI, right? AI makes a lot of sense, and it's of course super useful for the consumers of the application. So Scott goes like, yeah, AI, awesome. I can finally put AI into production, right? So he starts looking into this. He starts building out stuff, but then he realizes, oh my God, this is so much more complicated than I initially thought, right? So I need to worry about encryption, load balancing. I need to worry about latency. I need to find information about what kind of traffic is expected, right? And how do I scale afterwards? And then how do I do availability and stuff? So once he gets his his Kubernetes cluster, he then starts to work on his development environment to actually build the specific service, right? But this can actually take time, right? It's not that easy, not that straightforward in some cases, because the tools are developed independently, right? So there's a lot of a movement going on in the open source community. So instead of focusing on the code, Scott is actually tasked with a lot of stuff, right? And then in the back of his mind, he's like, I'm forgetting something, right? So weren't there policies inside the company around availability and security, and do I need to fulfill certain things from a compliance perspective? Oh, I don't know, right? So in the end, he goes like, yeah, whatever, right? So let me start coding, and then we can look into this later on, right? So he starts coding, but as you can probably imagine, the initial woohoo, I can build a new AI app, and I'm really looking forward to this chatbot. The excitement is gone, right? So what can we do? How can we make this better, right? So there must be a better way to actually do it. And so I mentioned it earlier, right? So Tanzu Application Platform. This is our developer experience and software development platform. So how would it look like in this scenario, right? So we want to build a chatbot. We want to leverage Kubernetes. We want to leverage the power of the open source community here, right? So let's start not in some fancy Kubernetes kubectl apply kind of scenario, right? But let's take a look at, okay, how do I build the software and how do I start in my IDE, right? So what we do here is we start up the IDE, right? We have Visual Studio Code. And on the left-hand side, you can see a large language model app accelerator. So this is the pre-integrated work here. And all you need to do is give it a name, right? And basically select where you're getting this from and the large language model you want to use and specify a few parameters, right? And then you go through the configuration and in the end, you can just click, okay, generate accelerator. And what happens is you get a new project in your IDE, right? And you can start working on the code immediately, right? So there is no building all this stuff up, right? This happens in the background, and the accelerator is built on, best practices. This is exactly the where learnings have been shared, right? So you don't reinvent the wheel, right? This has been done before. So let's leverage the capabilities that are out there. So you start building the code, right? And you have all the capabilities listed here and the files listed here on the left-hand side. But once this is done, right, once you've built your code, all you need to do when it comes to deploying this, for example, to your development environment, is a single command, right? Sounds like magic, but this is all you need to do. You specify to which application space you want to deploy it to, right? In this space, it's the Acme dev space, right? So Scott applies that command, right? And in the background, all the work is being done. So Scott is like, okay, wow, that was too easy. So let me take a look at how does it actually work. So we have Acme Bot, right? That's the application that we built here. So let's take a look at the developer portal on the backend, right? So this is what the developer can access to see what's going on from his project's perspective, right? And he can see, okay, Acme Bot looks like from a delivery perspective, this all went through, right? So he can see it in the developer portal. When he goes back to all the workloads, he can see, okay, the AI chatbot is deploying. Okay, looks good. Yep. And let's see, take a look at the website in the dev space. And wow, Acme Bot is here. You can see the chatbot has been deployed and the website has been updated, right? So Scott is like, woohoo, this is awesome. This is exactly the kind of experience I was hoping for when I'm building software. So who is making this possible? Let's take a look. Let's meet Shauna. Shauna is a platform engineer, right? And over time, and let's take a quick side look, right? So over time, DevOps, right, has led to more autonomy for the development teams, right, which is great. So they can do stuff more independently, right? They are building a lot of stuff, but sometimes for them it's quite a stretch, right? Especially when it comes to all these capabilities. You have Kubernetes, you have the cloud providers, you have the integrated services, a lot of stuff. So the development team sometimes need to stretch quite far to the platform to actually get stuff done. So Shauna and platform engineering in general are basically there to ease that pain, right? So, and there are building blocks that the platform can provide, like curated open source packages, built-in security, taking a look at application accelerators and building components together in application spaces, for example, to get to a joint solution, right? Helping the development team to actually find a golden path to production, right? So, and this is what we embody in Tanzu Application Platform. This is where the teams come together. And if we take a look at Tanzu Application Engine, as I mentioned earlier, so Tanzu Application Engine is this piece inside the Tanzu Application Platform, which allows the platform teams to focus on building a custom application runtime for the developers, right? So you see everything related to the application, the cost, the performance, the business insights, but also security findings, for example, right? So this is Shauna's side of the house, right? So she takes a look at the dashboard, and in here she can provide the platform that Scott so successfully used previously. But take a look at the application engine first, right? So Shauna created two spaces, the Acme prod space and the Acme dev space, right? And these are specifically for Scott's environment. So you can specify HA, you can specify encryption, security. So these are all attributes that are associated with the respective application space, right? If we take a look at the deployment, right? So we can see, okay, this is basically the flow of the application, right? We have two zones because HA is enabled. So we have two zones, and we can see all the capabilities here, right? So we see MTLS being enabled, but we also see the different services, right? And on the right-hand side, all the different components, right? So the functional, but also the non-functional requirements are listed. And you can also see the capabilities, right? So high availability has been enabled, auto-scaling has been enabled, and you can see what languages have been added there, but also things like PCI DSS and the compliance there, right? So what kind of features have been enabled in the platform when it comes to PCI DSS compliance. And we can also see, and this is quite interesting, so you see new Kubernetes version available, right? Just above me here. So this is something that the developers don't want to worry about, right? They want to worry about building applications, putting them in production. And so the platform team can actually upgrade this, right? So Shauna clicks on upgrade, and what happens is, because it's an HA environment, traffic will be focused on one zone, right? And the second zone will be updated. And then later on, once the second zone has been updated, zone 1 will be updated, and the traffic will flow through the secondary zone before everything comes back to normal, right? So this is the capability when it comes to upgrading, right, and making sure the application stays up and running. But we can also take a look at the latency, for example, inside the application. But we can also take a look at the where is the personal information actually flowing. So the PII data flow through the services can be seen as well, right? So these are the capabilities that we introduced with Tanzu Application Engine. So this is supporting the development workflow, but also the platform engineering workflow. At the same time, deploying applications is important, right? And getting this out into production is important. At the same time, the life cycle continues, right? So time goes by. So we are entering a new month, right? And you need to worry about cost, performance, and security management at the same time, right? Taking a look at the Kubernetes clusters. Are they utilized? Do we need to resize them, etc.? So these are all questions that are being asked of the platform team as well. And let's take a look at the top here, right? So we see this round little icon here. And this is where the power of AI and generative AI and large language models come into play, right? So this is the Intelligent Assist capability that we introduced just a few weeks ago at VMware Explorer. So this is actually a natural language interface into the technology that sits here, right? So Tanzu Hub, which also carries all the information about the different environments that Shauna needs to worry about, right? So one thing you can ask is like, okay, Intelligent Assist, so can you please show me the applications I should be concerned about, right? So, and then you get a feedback, okay, by the way, we have 3 applications with cost, security, and policy violations. So the Acme Fitness app, the Acme Nutrition, and the Acme Coaching app are the ones that have those policy violations. So you can say, okay, take me to Acme Fitness, right? And the next thing you see is the topology, but also the violations on the right-hand side with the security violations, right? And the cost violation, which is actually critical in this space. So we can go in there, right? Take a look and see, okay, what is the cost violation? How can I fix this, right? It's the question. And it looks like, this is what Intelligent Assist comes back with, it looks like an EKS cluster supporting the application has resizing recommendations. Okay, let's take a look. So currently deployed is an M5 environment, right? But an R5 environment would be a better fit, right? And you can see from $1,400 a month, this could go down to roughly $300 a month. And you can actually update it, right? And because we can do all the stuff that we've seen earlier, it's actually possible to apply this and make the change, right? And suddenly you have the best fit and it works out great, right? There are other ways that you can take a look at from an Acme Fitness perspective, right? So show me Acme Fitness, show me how it's going. And here you can see there are no more violations, right? Everything is in a medium state. It's not green, but it's in a medium state, right? So to quickly recap, so we saw the IDE integration, we saw application spaces, but also the intelligence services and intelligent assist in specific, right? So wrapping up here, VMware's approach to software development and especially the Tanzu portfolio is very much holistic, right? So we take a look at the practices and the culture through our Tanzu Lab services. And the second area, so we focus a lot on, making you successful with open source powered tools because of interoperability, security, all these capabilities that you get through interacting and working with the open source community. But also, we want to provide, and we do provide, a centralized platform to help you navigate all the craziness of this multi-cloud universe, right? So how do we get to production quickly without focusing too much on building platform on your own or making this even a burden to the developers, right? So this is all about accelerating application delivery and actually accelerating application delivery across clouds, right? So driving software agility by accelerating your ability to develop, operate, and optimize apps at scale. So thank you very much for listening. Feel free to be in touch, right? And I wish you a fantastic rest of the conference. And as I said earlier, right, I can't wait to be back in person. Thank you very much.